Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And on behalf of Cleveland Black Pride Committee and the African American HIV/AIDS Treatment, Prevention, and Education Initiative, we welcome you to an evening with Ed Graves. A little biography of Mr. Graves. On August 21st, 1999, in Kankakee, Canada, Boyd Ed Graves presented a 1971 flowchart to the international medical and scientific community. The flowchart is a research logic flow of an ultra-secret federal program entitled the Special Virus. Since August, the flowchart continues to receive intense scrutiny with many scientists and medical doctors now going on the record as confirming the diabolical nature of the Special Virus program. The Special Virus is a designer product from a century-long hunt for a contagious cancer that will selectively kill. The necessity for such a creation and deployment of AIDS in all is fully outlined in U.S. Population Control Policy Decision, the National Security Study Memorandum 200, or NSSM 200, dated 1974, written and presented by Dr. Henry Kissinger at a mega conference on population control held in Bucharest, Romania. Dr. Graves will further discuss his current depopulation policies in his presentation tonight and will initially encourage spontaneous questions from the audience after his opening remarks. Boyd E. Ed Graves was born the third of 9 children of James and Teresa Graves, both deceased. He was raised in Northeast Ohio before he received an appointment to the U.S. Naval Academy, Annapolis, Maryland in 1971, as you were. While in attendance at Annapolis, Dr. Graves received a BS degree with minors in engineering and Mandarin Chinese. He also lettered in boxing and was elected the first African-American president of the world-renowned Navy Glee Club. During his senior year at the Academy, he was the only midshipman to serve on the brigade staff the entire year. Dr. Graves received his commission from the Academy in 1975 and served as a communication officer above a guided missile destroyer, USS Buchanan. In August of 1990, Dr. Graves entered Ohio Northern University College of Law in Ada, Ohio, where he was a semifinalist in the Anthony J. Celebrezze moot court competition and earned his Juris Doctor degree in May of 1993. Dr. Graves is a lead plaintiff in the federal lawsuit for AIDS apology and reparations. He is also director of AIDS concerns for the International Medical Research Foundation, called Common Cause Medical Research Foundation, headquarters in Sudbury Province, Ontario, Canada. Dr. Graves' civil rights and AIDS activism has received clinical acclaim from around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, this evening, Dr. Boyd Graves.
Thank you very much, Tony, and for a fine introduction. And thank you very much for those of you who've turned out this evening. There are a lot of people who I am grateful for having even this opportunity to speak this evening, and chief amongst them is Tony himself and the effort that has a coalition to have my presence here this evening. Also like to give a thank you to Sam Black of the Historical Society. In fact, he's the Associate Curator for African American History, and his efforts have been paramount in having this event take place. I would further here initially acknowledge our videographer, Raouf, whose services are invaluable with respect to what we believe the historical impact of this presentation will be for generations yet to come as we move into the next millennium. Let me also say thank you to John Butler of the NRU, and a few other notables would be also Eric Taylor and Patrick Reynolds and Ron Roy. I'd first like to make a few opening remarks as it relates to where we are as a lawsuit. The status of the federal lawsuit that was filed September of 1998. So we've been in the federal court now for the last 13 months. 1 year ago yesterday, the federal judge ruled that the issue of suing the United States Pentagon for its role in the creation, development, and production and proliferation of the AIDS virus was a frivolous issue. On September 16th of this year, 1999, the federal court here, in particular Judge Rambo, issued an order, in essence wanting to solidify the fact that this is a frivolous issue. As a result of her order on September 16th, the people, i.e. myself, filed a motion for reconsideration. And I'd like to begin this evening by reading into the record of this conference and of this presentation the September 27, 1999 motion that is currently pending in the federal court on behalf of people who have been injured or killed by HIV and AIDS. And let me also say that Judge Wells has a traditional judicial custom of deciding motions within a 30-day time period. This motion that I'm about to read was filed on September 27th. Today is October 29. We have not had an order come down from the court with respect to this pending motion. We believe that one is imminent. So for those of us who are involved with the lawsuit of this issue, we are hopeful and grateful that perhaps we may get an inroad into the federal court, and we hope that that may be imminent, certainly no later than this coming Monday. Class motion for reconsideration of the court's order of September 16, 1999, based on newly discovered and newly developed evidence. This is here in the United States District Court for the Northern District of Ohio, Eastern Division. This motion for reconsideration of the court's order of September 16, 1999 is submitted based on the enclosed newly discovered and newly developed evidence of a 1962 federal program entitled Special Virus. Progress report number 15 of the Special Virus program correlates to the year 1978. The flowchart of this hidden program is attached to this motion for reconsideration as absolute proof of the laboratory origin of the AIDS virus and similarly associated AIDS-like chronic illnesses. And by that, let me just say that there is a syndrome called chronic fatigue syndrome, and there is also a Gulf War syndrome. We believe that the heart and the root of chronic fatigue syndrome and Gulf War syndrome relate specifically to this federal program, the Special Virus. Defendant Cohen, and that's Secretary Cohen of the Department of the U.S. Pentagon, Defendant Cohen, along with some of the other perpetrators, and I'm going to choose to name them by name for the purposes of clarifying the record as to who the perpetrators are. Dr. Robert Gallo, Dr. Robert Maneker, Dr. Paul Cotton, Dr. Fred Rapp, Dr. Carlton Gadusek, and Dr. Peter Duesberg. All should be bound by the U.S. Constitution, specifically the First and Fifth Amendments, and required to answer the complaint filed in this matter in the federal district court here. The legislative history of Congress and the intent and will of the American people require that Defendant Cohen, et al., answer the specific questions and allegations with respect to Class Exhibit 1. And for the record, Class Exhibit 1 is the sworn testimony of the U.S. Pentagon given on June 9. And Class Exhibit 1 has been subsequently confirmed by Defendant U.S. Pentagon and a top world microbiologist, Dr. Nancy Nicholson. Additionally, the court must entertain the testimony of Professor Francis Boyle, author of the United States 1989 Anti-Biological Terrorist Attack Act. The class of plaintiffs plead with the court to rule on the evidence. The credible evidence attached, exhibits attached to the complaint of September 28, 1998, and the many additional documents do indeed present a legitimate right to access to the federal court. The class exhibits are meaningful, and this class should not be precluded from their opportunity to have exposure and closure on this, the greatest human tragedy in the history of the world. Your Honor's attitude to dismiss as frivolous is reflective of just how far the monkey origin of AIDS, baseless propaganda, has truly spun. However, the plaintiffs do not believe this court nor any other government officials, including Dr. Gallows and Dr. Duesberg et al., can identify a single epidemiological study confirming epidemic immune deficiency in primates, in monkeys. This court continues to conveniently overlook the fact that if AIDS were ancestral, i.e. a derivative of some monkey immune virus, that somehow hopped species at one point, then how and why do we still have monkeys? The people believe the Constitution requires that this definable group of Americans are entitled to an apology and, in nearly every case, reparations, particularly those who have some evidence of microbial-inoculation. Now, that's a pretty big term, and let me just take a brief moment to digress and somewhat parenthetically say what microbial-inoculation is. In November 1967, and we'll have some slides, some overheads to this effect somewhat on, and so I'll be brief, the Central Intelligence Agency began a development of a poison dart gun. The dart gun can basically shoot you with AIDS at a distance of 100 yards without your knowledge that you've been hit. So we're saying that those persons who have received HIV and AIDS as a direct result of the government's microbial inoculation program truly do have a firm foothold on the venue of reparations. In determining the frivolity of an issue, the court cannot set aside direct evidence, as the court has done with our exhibit as it relates to the Pentagon's testimony from June and July of 1969. The defendant's sworn testimony is direct evidence. The special virus program is only part of a sophisticated scheme to cull humanity, consistent with the eugenics, i.e. the racist principles of the Rockefeller Institute and Foundation. However, this court cannot deny the existence of this program with the current submission of the 1971 flowchart. The dismissal of the named defendants in the manner that this court has done is contrary to the very nature of our system of justice when one considers the overwhelming evidence in support of the class allegations. The experts have reviewed the flowchart, and it is authentic. The special virus program isolated, stabilized, and mass-produced a leukemia lymphoma virus. Plaintiff brings to the court's attention that HIV was originally called leukemia lymphoma virus. The people have definitive proof of another non-public human subject experiment gone awry. We have compensated our victims before. We must do so again. The Constitution requires it. The heart of true America compels it. We respectfully request that this court permit service of process upon defendant Cohen et al. The United States scheme that the third and fourth world rapid population growth is a threat to the national security of the United States is supported by U.S. population policy decisions that have been in place since 1974. It is highly probable the United States incorporated state-sanctioned premeditated murder into its population culling policies as early as 1967. The first year the United States started giving taxpayer money to the United Nations Depopulation Wing, the Agency for International Development. I would suggest to the court at this point to also see the July 18, 1969 speech secret memo that was sent to the Congress by President Nixon on problems of population growth. That speech to the Congress was not declassified, I believe, until 1989. But it's a speech from 1969 of the president at that time, Nixon's, raising the red flag as to the necessity to take immediate action because of the rapid population growth in the third world. And when we say third world, we're primarily speaking of Africa. Even as early as 1969, it was determined that immediate steps had to be taken to thwart the rapid population growth in the third and fourth worlds. National Security Study Memorandum 200, titled The Implications of Worldwide Population Growth for U.S. Security and Overseas Interests, dated April 24, 1974, by the National Security Council, best presents the Rockefeller illusion of the necessity for depopulation, primarily of Africa, as articulated by President Nixon in July of 1969. The execution of NSSM 200 by President Gerald Ford, as outlined in National Security Memorandum number 314 on November 26, 1975, signed by Brent Scowcroft, is equally compelling as to the eugenics mindset, strangling humanity, and seemingly ensuring the continuation of racism well into the 21st century. However, in addition to the foregoing U.S. documents outlining and implementing the necessity to call the human race, particularly Africans, it is the National Security Council Memorandum number 46 that is most dreadful with respect to the necessary premeditation of the depopulation scheme. NSCM number 46 is titled Black Africa and the U.S. Black Movement, and it's dated March 17, 1978, and signed by Zbigniew Brzezinski for President Carter. And for the convenience of the court, I attached that National Security Council memorandum to the court filing that we filed last month. NSCM number 46 is the United States contingency plan to counteract African-American response to the realization that the United States was depopulating Africa. And we'll see NSCM number 46 again through our display. The documents attached to this motion for reconsideration for service on Defendant Cohen are credible and require an answer under the Constitution. The complaint filed on September 28, 1998 was sufficient for notice to the named defendants as to the specific allegations against them. The supportive evidence of the constitutional right to have Defendant Cohen et al. Respond is incorporated in the collective exhibits of this complaint filed to date, and the federal rules have been met and exceeded with respect to sufficiency of the complaint. Additionally, the recent letters from Defendant Cohen and Senator Voinovich prove conclusively the class has presented a non-frivolous case. I asked the court then to take a look at the February 9, 1999 letter from the Pentagon. We'll be seeing that in a moment. And I also asked the court to view Senator Voinovich's correspondence of the last couple of months. Senator Voinovich believes this is a credible issue. The court must note that frivolous indigent complaints are rarely supported by U.S. senators and physicians and scientists from around the world. Defendant Cohen's February 9, 1999 letter to the plaintiff's class here confirms our Exhibit 1, the 1969 sworn testimony of Defendant Cohen, i.e. the Pentagon at that time, seeking to create an immune-suppressing contagious virus for which no natural immunity could have been acquired. And we'll have that document up here as well. But it is actually, in actuality, the first time the term acquired immune deficiency syndrome, in essence, appears in print. And by golly, by gum, this is 15 years before the alleged announcement of the discovery of HIV in 1984. According to Defendant Cohen's spokesperson, Dr. Donald MacArthur, on June 9, 1969, before the U.S. House of Representatives Appropriations Committee, the U.S. Pentagon concedes it was working on an offensive, contagious, synthetic biological agent that would lead to worldwide scourge and Black Death type plague. The 1971 flowchart supports Defendant Cohen's 1969 sworn testimony. Further, however, the flowchart is page 61 of Progress Report number 8 of the Special Virus Program. And for your convenience, I have an overview of that flowchart, and it's a blown-up size, and each of you tonight is receiving a copy of this flowchart, but I wanted to put it on the record in front of the camera as well. Here is the 1971 flowchart. This is the United States government document. It takes the research logic of the Special Virus Program from A to Z. If this flowchart existed by itself, I would say that there would be some doubt as to what it was trying to achieve. However, this flow chart is accompanied by 15 yearly progress reports that outline each experiment, each contract, and each contractor associated with this hidden, ultra-secret federal program. And for our purposes tonight, I wanted to make sure that we again see the flow chart. I know it's not close enough for the camera's sake, but again, it is something tangible. We can put our hands on this, and it outlines every step of the way as to what they were doing from 1962 forward. We know that they were also doing some things before 1962 as well, but here we have their definitive missing link document, because it is indisputable evidence of the laboratory origin of AIDS. This matter should not be deemed frivolous until the court has conducted an independent review to determine the validity and credibility of the flowchart, its research logic as outlined, and the correlating experiments, contracts, and contractors, specifically identified in the ensuing progress reports. The class believes progress reports numbers 1 through 7 of this program have been purposefully destroyed. Defendant Cohen must answer this additional allegation relative to the creation, production, proliferation of AIDS, and the destruction of the progress reports. There is sufficient additional evidence of the laboratory origin of AIDS, and thus the unwitting involvement of Americans and others as human subject experiments. The scientific papers are replete with substantiating significance of the overwhelming proof of the bioengineering of the special virus of AIDS. Chief amongst the supportive scientific papers is the 1983 report from the National Academy of Sciences. And according to their proceedings, which is a record of their papers that are before the National Academy of Sciences, in 1983, they have an article that is pan-specific and indeed on point with our presentation here this evening. HIV and Visna is an Icelandic sheep disease. HIV and Visna, and then this is according to the United States' own National Academy of Sciences. HIV and Visna are highly similar and share all structural elements except for a small segment in their genetic sequencing, which is nearly identical to the HTLV3, the human T-cell lymphotropic virus. This article from the National Academy of Sciences, among others, confirms the fingerprint of man in the genetic sequencing of AIDS. Visna is a man-made virus sent to Iceland by the German government. And the way that we know that is that in 1930, the German government sent 2 bull sheep to Iceland, and then the Visna epidemic in Iceland began. Germany did not have a Visna epidemic in Germany before it sent those 2 sheep to Iceland in 1930. This is in that same time period with the Tuskegee syphilis experiments that were getting underway. So you have apparently coordinated activities, and we believe that the link is even stronger between the German government and the U.S. government going on at the same time. But the Visna virus came to Iceland from Germany in 2 bull sheep, and then you had an explosion of Visna disease in Iceland. There was no epidemic in Germany, but as soon as these sheep got to Iceland, there was an epidemic. So we think that the link is significant as to the man-made nature of the Visna virus. Therefore, it is not a far stretch for us to show the Visna sequence in the genetic sequencing of HIV, and to know that if Visna is man-made, and Visna is in the genetic sequencing of HIV, it's not a far stretch to also show and see that HIV is man-made. In light of the significant evidence in support of the complaint, reasonable persons would conclude this complaint, heavily supported by substantial, credible evidence, is entitled to an answer from Defendant Cohen. Plaintiff has continually developed a ready reservoir of experts to augment the court's understanding. We have on board some of the country's finest retrovirologists and MDs and AIDS origin researchers. If I can digress just a moment, amongst them who are ready at a moment's notice to come and take part in the federal court are Drs. Alan Cantwell and Dr. Lynn Horowitz. Two of the gentlemen who I am naming there are gentlemen who are part of a presentation called Virus Makers of the CIA. Dr. Cantwell and Dr. Horowitz, yes. I'm sorry, yes. Virus Makers of the CIA. I think when you have an opportunity, and I wasn't coming here this evening to plug a whole lot of other people's materials, I'll say that, but I think this one is significant. Virus Makers of the CIA, Dr. Cantwell and Dr. Horowitz, what they have to say here complements this presentation in every way as they address the issue of the special virus program. And these are the experts. And make no mistake about it, although I am the director of AIDS Concerns for Medical Research Foundation, I am not a doctor. I do have the Juris Doctor degree, and in that sense I'm a Juris Doctor. But I won't translate it over to the standpoint that to have any confusion as to the fact that I'm a medical doctor. No, I am a Juris Doctor in that regard, who has been appointed a medical research director. These gentlemen are the experts. They say this virus is from the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States of America. That's what the experts say. I'm not making a far stretch to repeat what they may have to say. They have each publicly pronounced their conclusions as to the definitive proof of the existence of the hidden special virus program. Inside, however, of the special virus program is an ultra-secret program entitled Special Virus Leukemia Program. And we have here on the table this evening a particular section out of the Progress Report number 8. These pages of the special virus program, which are now attached to the court record of this matter, definitively prove the man-made, the man-to-monkey, the iatrogenic origin, that's what that man-to-monkey origin, man-to-primate, of the medically induced origin of simian immunodeficiency virus, i.e. that we created a monkey immunodeficiency virus, and that's how monkeys got it. Obviously, they have not had a simian immunodeficiency virus for centuries and centuries. That's pretty clear. Additionally, beginning on page 276 under the summary of the inoculation program, the United States gives an overview of newborn monkey inoculations and releases. For any appeal in this matter, the class believes it can meet its prima facie case and burden of showing sufficient facts to further allege the special virus AIDS does indeed have a predisposition towards people of color. Progress Report number 8 reveals the special virus program sought to determine if the Epstein-Barr virus had specific racial blood markers. The program used 2 test groups. One group were inner-city kids in Philadelphia, and by that, I think most of us would probably come to mean African-American kids. The other group were kids in Sweden. Although the experiments with inner-city children in Philadelphia began in 1966, by the way, the comparative study in Sweden was not initiated until April of 1969. Now, that is a significant date to begin that study, because the apparent strategy to initiate the study with the kids in Sweden seems to be on the heels of a conference at Fort Detrick, Maryland, the biological testing center that the United States has, that was held at the Fort Detrick conference on April 4th and April 5, 1969. And the title of that conference at Fort Detrick was Entry and Control of Foreign Nucleic Acid. Many of the top world scientists at that time did not want to attend that Fort Detrick conference because they knew what that conference was about. Entry and control of foreign nucleic acid. It appears that Defendant Cohen intentionally sought to create a new microorganism that selectively kills, based on racial blood markers. The AIDS virus has an affinity to a deficiency of the OKT4 epitope in people of color. These are from the scientific papers. These are not speculations on my part, and you'll continue to hear me say that. The results of the racial blood markers affiliated with Epstein-Barr virus were reported in the 1984 yearbook of the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. So what they're saying is that their test group of inner city kids in Philadelphia and their test group of kids in Sweden, they found something. But they didn't have the courtesy to publish those remarks and those findings in the United States. They only published those findings in Sweden. And what they found was that the Epstein-Barr virus has a 10-to-1 detrimental effect on people of color. Throughout the life of this program called Special Virus, the progress reports reveal the extensive work this Special Virus program was doing on Epstein-Barr virus. Quite frankly, and short and to be succinct, the Epstein-Barr virus was being tweaked and tinkered with to help to get it to trigger a lymphoma. The lymphoma is called Burkitt's lymphoma, named after a scientist who discovered a particular type of lymphoma in the jawbone of African children in 1958. The work of the U.S. government inside of the Special Virus program is such that they were attempting to get the Epstein-Barr virus to tweak it to induce this African Burkitt's lymphoma. Again, let me remind you, the initial name of HIV was leukemia lymphoma virus. This flowchart produces a leukemia lymphoma virus. Addressing the issue of frivolity as to why the court dismissed this case last October, we respectfully request the court to reconsider the congressional intent of that section of the law that the judge used. The court's order of September 16, 1999 strongly implies that the class representative submitted an unsupported, baseless complaint against Defendant Cohen. The origin of AIDS under the auspices of the U.S. government is not a frivolous issue unworthy of a response. Plaintiff and this class of plaintiffs should not be relegated to the dismissal scheme of the poverty provision of the section of the law that the judge used. Plaintiff is the class representative for Americans who have been injured or killed by the United States synthetic biological agent. This class has sufficient credible evidence to support its claims of bioengineering. In essence, we're saying recombined animal and human viruses. And we have sufficient credible evidence of the deployment of the HIV enzyme. As it relates to Africa, our government placed the HIV enzyme in the smallpox vaccinations that went to Africa. As it relates to the United States, our government placed the HIV enzyme in the experimental hepatitis B vaccine that went to Manhattan. The origin of AIDS under the auspices of the U.S. government is not a frivolous issue, as we have said. I am the class rep for Americans who have been injured or killed by this synthetic biological agent. And we're attempting to go forward. We believe that the class, in the name of the United States Constitution, is entitled to an answer to the complaint filed in this matter, and that the class and the complaint meet all applicable federal rules for construction and sufficiency of complaint under the identified jurisdictions that we have identified to the court. The court must explain the insufficiency pursuant to the section of law that the court chose to dismiss this case. I'd like to go on to the legal argument, and just briefly, because I think that's very important to include that here. The court's order of September 16, 1999 should be reconsidered because of the substantial credible evidence now supporting the complaint filed on September 28, 1998. However, the court's order of September 16, 1999 should be reconsidered based on the precedents of law in the Sixth Circuit of Court of Appeals in the United States Supreme Court. The court's order of September 16, 1999 violates universally the rights of poor people, particularly as it relates to this case. Poor people with HIV and AIDS who are being denied equal protection and due process under the Constitution of the United States. The court's order of September 16, 1999 stands in contradiction to significant, well-established case law, and we list a number of the cases for the judge. The court must ensure that poor people, and particularly poor people with HIV and AIDS, have adequate, effective, and meaningful access to the courts. This case has persisted in the chambers of the judge here in this case for a year. Americans and others with HIV and AIDS deserve better. Wherefore, plaintiff Boyd E. Graves prays the court will reconsider its order of September 16, 1999, and allow service of process on defendant Cohen. Plaintiff further prays the court will certify the class without further delay and immediately appoint counsel. Plaintiff further prays the court will effect service of process pursuant to the summons and federal marshal service papers filed in the docket of this matter on June 23, 1999. And quite frankly, the court should deem the court's order of September 16, 1999 moot. These intertangled issues of the laboratory origin of AIDS and depopulation are real and worthy of jury adjudication as demanded by the United States Constitution. Respectfully submitted to the district court here in Cleveland. Again, that motion for reconsideration was filed on September 27th. The Judge Wells, Leslie Wells, has a judicial custom of deciding orders in a 30-day period. So we are hopeful that we'll see something from the court here, and I would think next week. So please stay tuned as it relates to our thrust into the federal court. People have been saying, where does the case stand now? After 13 months of lingering in the federal court system, we are still there and we're very strong. Many people over the past 13 months did not give us very much of a chance to even have the case last just a couple of months in the federal court. But here we are, 13 months later, and we want to let the people know that we're still there and we're still getting our message out. What I have also here is a CD-ROM. If I could find the appropriate page, it would help. And it's on the table here of some of the things that we have out this evening. Inside of the CD-ROM is a forward as to the underpinnings of what the CD-ROM is about. The CD-ROM was prepared earlier this year in August, and it's titled The Societal Impact of the Special Virus Program of the United States. And it's just a couple of paragraphs as to the forward attached to the CD-ROM. And I'd like to to read those couple of paragraphs. By the way, the CD-ROM is available, and so are many of the other things on the table for those of you who might be so inclined. The fingerprint of man will eternally linger in the genetic sequencing of the AIDS virus. The scientific proof is compelling and substantial. And the missing, and I quote missing, because they hide things and they destroy things, and we all know that. The missing data, the missing experiments, and contracts have been found. This CD-ROM was compiled by a friend, Eric Taylor of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He's done one hell of a job with trying to continue to get this information out. And the CD represents some of the scientific evidence that I have been furthering to uncover, which confirms the laboratory origin of AIDS. The AIDS virus is the designer byproduct of a hidden federal program entitled Special Virus. The Special Virus Program of the United States began in 1962 and issued 15 yearly progress reports. The program met every year at Hershey Medical Center, Penn State University. By 1969, the Special Virus was a reality. Fort Detrick held a conference in April of that year. The Pentagon informed the Congress on June 1969, and President Nixon sent a special memo to Congress on July 18, 1969. Shortly thereafter, Dr. Robert C. Gallo briefed NATO in Belgium. And in 1975, as a national security policy and priority, President Ford signed on to a plan that would attempt to curtail the population growth in the Fourth World. In 1977, the Special Virus Program produced 60,000 liters of a new immune-suppressing virus. Suddenly, there were epidemic deaths in Africa and Manhattan, and a higher rate of infection in the United States than in Africa. This virus has an ancestral origin, only in the feeble-mindedness of deep-rooted racism, accustomed to the advantages of an uneven playing field. Each and every victim of the Special Virus Program is innocent and entitled to an apology and reparation. Sanctioned remedies that we have for state disorder. And I end by saying thank you for your genuine interest in the welfare of humanity. But that's the CD-ROM that we have, and it is on the table there, and for those who would like to take a peek at what we have there, that's fine, and for anyone interested in ordering that, that's available as well. I'd like to shift over just a bit and address an issue that has come up and prior to coming to the slide and the overhead projections, which we'll do as part 2 of this presentation. But the issue here with the Historical Society, because apparently I seemingly can't read, or I've lost track of something. But Raouf, I have a letter here that there's just a couple of these that I have that are not on overheads, and I'm just going to hang that in front. And I know it's probably not, it's too small to nail in on, but I'm holding this out because I'm holding it out for a reason. I believe that, and if you can almost see it, it does have the Historical Society letterhead on it. So I'm not very computer literate, so I didn't go and make this document up. But it is a November 18, 1998 document from the Historical Society. And to be short and brief, skipping down to paragraph 3, it's suggesting that at some point we will effect a transfer of this material to the African American Archives for permanent preservation. So this is from November of last year. It's an 11-month-old letter. And I'm bringing this letter up because there is in my mind, and for lack of a better word, a degree of recalcitrance, reluctance, if you would, coming from the museum at this point, where many of their recent discussions have avoided and excluded, seemingly on purpose to me, their November letter from last year where this research has been selected for permanent preservation. So I'm holding this out because here is the Society's November 18th letter. I think any further correspondence from the Society on this issue should include their own correspondence. And I'm not going to address that too much more because I feel that we're going to have a burgeoning issue with respect to this, and what I'm saying in short, it seems to me as if the Society does not want to have my research here at this point. Somehow it is unkosher that a young man has gone and dug up the history as it relates to depopulation and population control programs in the United States, that is something that is not worthy for this society. I would think that it is, and quite frankly, and to be brief again on the issue, that if this information cannot be preserved here at this society, I'm sure that we will find a resting place for this information someplace else. So I did want to make that for the record. I think that there will be some ensuing discussions between the society and myself on that issue. I'd also say, in putting that issue aside, that the society may want to take note of the prior correspondence from Senator DeWine, May of 1999, and the prior correspondence from Senator Voinovich, that this is an issue that has been going on in the congressional houses of both the Senate and the Congress for a lot longer time than this issue has been presented here to the Society for Preservation. So we believe that the paper trail is sufficient to alert the society that this issue did not begin last evening. I think the society, all it needs to do is look at its own correspondence, and they'll see that they have correspondence on this issue that date back to November of last year. In that same vein, there's another document here, and we'll do a couple more of these and take a break here shortly. But there is another document here that is critical to the mindset of our larger society, and for those of us speaking from a minority perspective, that there is a larger society. The larger society is reflected in the medical and scientific ideology that is pervasive to date. And quite frankly, that ideology is this, that the HIV enzyme is an ancestral enzyme that had a birthing in some type of intimate contact between Africans and monkeys. And in that vein, the lead authority for HIV research in the Cleveland area is Dr. Michael Letterman. Dr. Letterman has issued a May 1999 letter where he was provided the information from the Special Virus Program as it relates to Dr. Robert Gallo. Dr. Letterman states in his May 1925 letter that, "Thank you for sending me the brief report on the early Gallo studies. I am aware of this work, but cannot perceive the relevance of this work to the concerns you expressed to me." Well, to Dr. Michael Letterman, the head of HIV research in the Cleveland area, I challenge Dr. Letterman to contact Dr. Foley, Brian Foley, of the Los Alamos Nuclear Laboratory HIV project. I challenge Dr. Letterman to contact Colonel Jack Kingston, the chairman of the National Security Advisory Board, who just a week and a half ago proclaimed that this special virus program is larger than the Manhattan atomic bomb program from World War II. That indeed, this is the largest secret program in the history of the United States. So I present that information back, and in a public venue to Dr. Letterman. Since somehow he can't conceive the early work of Dr. Robert Gallo, who indeed isolated the HIV enzyme, as to its significance to this hidden federal program, Special Virus. Dr. Letterman was unaware of the program called Special Virus. So I wanted to get into the record some of these documents that we didn't have overheads for, but are critical to understanding the mindset of the larger society as it holds on to the myth that somehow this virus is the product of ancestral behavior from Africans and monkeys. In Africa, the cesspool of virology as it relates to all those germs and diseases coming out of Africa. Many of those germs and diseases we placed in Africa. That's what the evidence shows, not just from the scientific papers, but the epidemiological records as well. That's what the evidence shows. We put these things there. Now, I don't know, Raouf, how far we are into the presentation at this point, but this would be a good juncture at this point. Take a short break, and then we'll go into the overheads. And if there's questions as we present some of the overheads, we'll be certainly happy to take those questions. We'll take a few minutes here, and we'll readjust and come right back at you. Thank you very much. Thanks, and welcome back for part two of our presentation. I didn't get a chance in the first part to actually put into the record one of the progress reports of the Special Virus Program. It baffles me as to the lack of availability of this program and its progress reports. And by that I mean, let me illustrate for you my frustration. This program is so well hidden that our prestigious Allen Memorial Library, medical library here on Euclid, which houses the libraries of Case Western Reserve and University Hospitals and the Cleveland Clinic, does not have any of the progress reports of the Special Virus Program under the Allen Memorial Library system. Now, having said that, the main library downtown does indeed have one of the progress reports, number 14, which represents the year 1977. It is available through the government document section, level 4, 4th floor at the main library downtown. So it is on reserve, by the way, that I have it placed off. So when you go down to the, if you go, and I'm imploring that you do go, to track this down independently yourself. Go to the 4th floor of the main library, ask the librarian for the book that Mr. Graves has on reserve. I'm going to keep it checked out and reserved there since you can't take it out of the building, but keep it in my name for as long as I can. And it's progress report number 14 of this program. And I will offer to you that it will become glaringly clear as to the ethnic nature of this Special Virus Program, i.e. the experiments inside of progress report number 14, which are found in our library, clearly do show the extensive amount of work being done to find something that had an impact on people of color. So this is the program, the Special Virus Program. What we're going to do now is to take a look at some of the slides that we have. I wanted you to have first this first one here, which gives you an overview of the number of AIDS cases, and which total number down there is total number of AIDS deaths since the beginning of the epidemic. 11 million people have already died. 11 million people, 700,000, have died from AIDS since the beginning of this epidemic, the genocide of people of color. And it breaks it down as a number of other categories. But so I wanted to bring that up as the initial slide. Next slide, please. What we're looking at here is, and it's, I don't know how well this is going to come out in the final analysis, but this is a letter from Penn State University, because in each of these progress reports of the Special Virus Program, what it states is that this program met every year at Hershey Medical Center and Penn State University. So I wrote Penn State and said, hey, I'm trying to find some information about this meetings that we're having there every year, 1963 to 1978. State writes back and says that I am responding to the request that you submitted to this office by letter dated March 13th. I can confirm that Professor Rapp was a faculty member, and we do not have any records related to the information that you requested. So Penn State has no records of the Special Virus Program meeting there every year of the life of this program from 1963 to 1978. For their annual joint working conference. So I thought that this document is significant because it further illustrates the depth of control of the propagandist pitch that they worked on this Special Virus Program under stealth and cover of night for a reason. And that reason is that this virus discriminates. This virus is selective. It's almost like the sickle cell anemia trait that people of color have. That the AIDS virus, as it's swimming through, is looking for that kind of hook to hook on to people of colors, the blood marker that we have that is significant and distinctive from that of the larger society. Next slide, please. Okay, it's kind of dark and hazy, and if you can get the letterhead in at the top there, this is from the, and I'm just giving you an overview of some of the work, and we don't have the best overhead projector. So this is from the Pentagon, 2 million from earlier this year, and what they're saying is that, Mr. Graves, we can find our testimony from July 1, and here it is, but we can't find our testimony from June 9, and this is from 1969. So somehow, in my ultimate wisdom, and boy, that's a term I don't use very often, somehow we were able to, by the Pentagon's definition, if you believe this letter, and you may want to move it aside from time to time if you can to get most of it, or some a little bit more on it or in there. But if you believe what the Pentagon is telling us here, is that, yeah, we can find our testimony from July 1. We can't find our testimony from June 9. Well, I have a counter document, and I think the document that I have is probably, I didn't write this, and again, please bear in mind my computer skills are not this great to create a document of this sort, but this appears to be from the monthly calendar of the United States government publications. This document from the Pentagon is false. This February 9 letter is false. This document says that it's false. This document is the record from June 9 of 1969. There is no July 1 testimony, as the Pentagon would now have us believe. It happened on June 9. And the reason why the Pentagon wants us to believe it happened on July 1 is so that they don't have to talk about what they really did say on June 9. What they say on June 9 is perhaps the most critical testimony, implications testimony in the history of the United States. And it'll come up here in a minute on another slide, and I'll confirm that that is the true testimony of the Pentagon. And we'll get there in just a moment. If we could see the next slide, and bear in mind that we're going to keep this in context here for the next couple of slides. Here we have the, the cover page to the congressional testimony from 1969. This is from U.S. House Resolution 15090. U.S. House Resolution was signed into law, Public Law Number 97-171, 12/29/1969. And so if we could go to the next slide, I just wanted you to know that this is Exhibit 1 in the lawsuit. This is Exhibit 1 in the lawsuit, and page 2 of that. And right there it says synthetic biological agents. This is coming out of the congressional record, which I can definitively put my hand on because I'm holding the congressional record right here. That's a little dark and I can't see it quite that well, but for purposes of what we're doing this evening, I hope that'll be okay. But I'm also at the same time looking at page, which that is 129. And for the record, the Pentagon did testify to Congress under oath that it would be possible to produce a synthetic biological agent, an agent that does not naturally exist, and for which no natural immunity could have been acquired. Here is the first definition of AIDS from June of 1969. And for those who may doubt, here is the congressional record with respect to that testimony. This is fact, that the Pentagon has testified under oath that they were working on an offensive biological agent for which no natural immunity could have been acquired. 1969. And it goes on to say a few other things. And quite frankly, number 2 there is it's probably as damaging as any other point in the history of mankind. Because it says within the next 5 to 10 years, it would probably be possible to make a new infective microorganism which could differ in certain important aspects from any known disease-causing organisms. Most important of these is that it might be refractory, resistant, to the immunological and therapeutic processes upon which we depend to maintain our relative freedom from infectious disease. What they're saying there is that their new immune-suppressing organism would weaken the body's immune system so as to allow for the onset of infectious disease. There is no doubt as to the nature of the Pentagon's language as it relates to what they were trying to make and how they were trying to make it. They made a virus that would weaken the immune system of the human body. Here is the specific paragraph that the Pentagon says they now can't find. Dr. MacArthur, and it's right there is exactly where we want to be and what to do, etc. Talking about potential offensive agents, I will first restate the constraints I mentioned earlier that we have put on ourselves as a matter of policy to prevent exactly what people have been saying. And what have people been saying? That there will be a worldwide scourge or a Black Death type disease that will envelop the world or major geographical areas if some of these materials were to accidentally escape. Well, he says that could not possibly happen with the biological agents that we have. That is a constraint that we have put on ourselves. However, what does he say next? However, to keep the record straight, we have done a small amount of research on a few agents that do not satisfy this constraint, i.e., we have worked on a few agents that will lead to worldwide scourge and Black Death type plague. Now, that is a part of this record. It is page 121 of the congressional record. This is Public Law 97-171, 1229, 1969. This is the public record of the United States as it relates to the specific language that places the HIV enzyme into the public domain. This is our government, the government of the United States. And I'm not getting too overly warmed up about that, but I think we need to re-educate ourselves and do it in the most conclusive way. And this is the best way that I know how. Now, I've mentioned the name Dr. Gallo on a number of occasions, and there are 3 pages to this particular slide, and down there at the bottom is exactly where we want to go, so we can go down, and down a little bit further. Dr. Robert Gallo. This is Investigation of Viral Carcinogenesis in Primates. Okay? Dr. Robert Gallo is listed. This is 71, NIH 71, 2025. Dr. Robert Gallo, indeed, the record reveals, is and was a project officer for the Special Virus Program. The record reveals that. If we can put the next slide on, here is where, out of this program, here is exactly where the experts say, and I'm recapitulating what the experts say, right there is fine. Right there is fine, if you can move it up just a bit. An RNA-dependent DNA polymerase, similar to that associated with RNA, which is ribonucleic acid, which is the mechanism by which once HIV invades your body, it has a mechanism that kind of does its own work. It's called RNA. An RNA-dependent DNA polymerase similar to that associated with RNA tumor viruses was detected in human leukemic cells. Now, I just showed you on the last overhead that this was a primate monkey experiment. But yet they're putting in here that they found something in human tissue in a monkey experiment. But not in normal cells stimulated by phytohemagglutinin. The enzyme was isolated. Here is the isolation of the HIV enzyme. The enzyme was isolated, purified, and concentrated 200-fold, making possible its further characterization and study in relation to the leukemic process in man. But yet, this is a primate study where they threw in the identification of the RNA-DNA-dependent polymerase, which is the marker of the HIV enzyme, in a monkey study. Thank you. Very significant. Now, this is page 3 of it, and it goes, well, is it up at the top, please? Up at the top. Oh, that's the bottom then. No, it's the top, please. Yeah. What I wanted to show was this was page 3, the conclusion of this section, experiment, this contract. Here it clearly shows the date contract initiated, February 12, 1962. This is the record of the chronology of HIV in the United States of America. Next slide, please. What we have here, many of you are aware that Dr. Robert Gallo in April of 1984 announced that we have found the mystery illness. And what Dr. Gallo announced in 1984 was this. He says, we have found the mystery illness. It is a reverse transcriptase of type C virus particles of human origin. What we have found is Dr. Gallo's paper from 1971, whereby his paper in 1971 is identical to his announcement of HIV in 1984. How can that be? Dr. Gallo wrote in 1971, reverse transcriptase in type C virus particles of human origin. Yet, 13 years later, he goes, aha, we have found the mystery illness. But here is Dr. Gallo's paper from 1971. So we think that that is significant. We believe that we are entitled to an explanation from Dr. Gallo. We have written to Dr. Gallo. He has not responded. And I think that we're placing that into the record. Now, for anyone who thought that the United States has not done research on ethnic weapons, i.e., can and is it possible to make a weapon to affect a particular group of people based on blood markers, you better bet your bottom dollar that they have been doing some research. Here is the military review. You see it's October 1970, and the first issue under it, and I've just shown you the cover and you can go ahead on, is Ethnic Weapons, November 1970, i.e. identifying the distinctive blood markers in the different races. And by golly, by gum, this Scientific American paper is from 1951, where it talks about the RH and the races of man and the intense research going on to identify different blood markers in the different ethnic groups of people from around the world. So for anyone to say that we didn't have that kind of technology back then, they're wrong. And for anyone to say that we weren't doing that kind of research back then, they too are wrong. And then we wanted to put that up. If we could go one more further here. And then get the heading here. I mentioned this earlier that early research was showing that this HIV thing was seemingly affecting people of color more. It was just a decoy for them, by the way, to put it in the hepatitis B experiments that went to Manhattan and to the homosexual community. The HIV virus has an affinity to a deficiency in the blood of people of color. And that deficiency, and this is one of the scientific papers that addresses this issue, is in the OKT4 epitope, that people of color have a deficiency with respect to that epitope, which it appears that the HIV virus, the enzyme, was designed to seek out this deficiency in the blood of people of color. That's why we have in the United States today the fastest growing group of people acquiring the virus are African American women. I think the statistics speak to that effect. Now, what many people don't know about is and we mentioned this in the letter to the motion to the court, was this microbio-inoculator. Here is a picture of the CIA's poison dart gun. And in fact, that is Colby, the CIA director at the 1975 Senate Select hearings, holding up one of them. In fact, he kind of just whipped it out, to use the expression, during the course of this Senate hearing in 1975. And basically, I think I've stolen this piece here and spliced it together from a book called A Higher Form of Killing, so to give them the proper site. But basically, they say, beneath the bright lights and whirling cameras, Colby suddenly produced what he described in masterful bureaucraties as a non-discernible microbio-inoculator. It looked like a normal .45 pistol, but Colby told the senators it was powered by electricity. A small battery in the handle produced enough power to fire a small poison dart 100 yards. The non-discernible element of Colby's description now became apparent. Tests had shown the weapon to be so effective that a poison dart could be fired into a victim without his even noticing that he had been hit. This is the microbiome inoculation program. And this actually does explain some things as to why certain kind of people got or have HIV or AIDS when they haven't had really any kind of the suspect conduct that would require that would place them in that arena. If we can move that a little bit to the other side, that way. This is a document that goes back to October of 1967, where they began to make this microbial-inoculator. So we have the whole history here of this microbial-inoculation program. It cannot be denied. The people are entitled to a response to the elements that are being raised with respect to these secret kinds of activities of our government as to what it is and what it is about. A non-discernible, item number 6, a non-discernible microbial-inoculator has been developed, especially for use by the clandestine services. For some reason I don't like the word clan, but the clandestine services, and has been, hold it right there, been demonstrated successfully. The disseminating device is accurate at ranges up to 250 feet and has a very low sound level. This is 1967, so you can imagine the perfection of this microbial-inoculator here as we end towards the turn of the century. If we could go further, please. This is my DD-214 as to when I got out of the military in 1977. It does say honorable there. We appreciate that. But if we could go down a little bit further on this, and it's coming up right there on the bottom, I don't know how well that shows. There is an X's there. In the military, when you have such official documents, as such as a DD-214, because it shapes your veterans' benefits for the rest of your life, they place X's to show that there are no further entries in a particular area. And I think some of you who've been in the military would know that. And you see X's on this page as well, on my DD-214. But you also see something else. You see a Secretary Navy order entered in an area where the X's are. So that means that it was entered after I signed. This Secretary of the Navy order is very interesting because it's entered after I signed my DD-214, on my DD-214. And the X's indicate to you that there shouldn't be nothing after that last entry up there, and that's why they put the X's there. So we're in the throes of trying to understand, indeed was and is Boyd Ed Graves a candidate and has been a candidate for microbial-inoculation. I have no friends who are also HIV positive over the last 30 years in my circle of friends and my interpersonal interactions. We're suggesting that because of the timing with the CIA and the workup of their microbial-inoculation and this order entered in my DD-214 in an area where there are no further entries, we believe that we can establish a legitimate case of microbial-inoculation, and we intend to pursue that. Here we have a statement from 1985, one of the newspapers. Expert says lab may be AIDS culprit. The AIDS virus could have been made man-made and released either deliberately or by mistake from a biological research lab. The British expert on sex diseases said Thursday, John Seale, said there are serious flaws in the theory that the AIDS developed from spontaneous mutations of a human virus or was transferred from animals such as the green monkey. He said that since 1949, biological research centers have known about the highly lethal Visna virus, and we mentioned Visna very briefly earlier. The Visna virus grew easily in cell cultures, had a structural remarkably similar to the AIDS virus, which attacks the body's immune system, has one gene extra over the Visna virus, the AIDS does. Inserting an extra gene into a virus is a routine procedure in modern genetic engineering. The potential of Visna virus for development as a strategic weapon in biological warfare would have been considered by several appropriate research establishments since 1949. Make no mistake about that. The idea that AIDS virus has been manipulated in a lab merits serious consideration. I think we all agree with that. If we go to the next slide, please. Here you have a science article from June of 1985, January of 1985, and it says at the top, AIDS equals Visna. Visna, again, was a German man-made virus and sent to Iceland in 1930. If AIDS equals Visna, and it does, AIDS is man-made. Here you have a paper co-authored by Dr. Robert Gallo that concludes that AIDS equals Visna, i.e. that their structure is similar, their weight, they're similar in every area of virology, AIDS and Visna. Now, if we go to the next slide, this comes into play as to what the problem is with this AIDS out of Africa monkey origin. Here you have a graphic from Dr. Robert Gallo. At the very top, he says, ancestral origin, big question mark, don't know where it came from. You also see down old world primates, you see cattle. You also see African man. You also see, over to Japan. You see the slave trade mentioned, and you see the Americas. And you say this diagram was presented by Dr. Gallo, National Cancer Institute, during his introductory speech for a meeting on human T-cell leukemia viruses at the Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory in New York. This document is from Dr. Lynn Horowitz's book, Emerging Viruses, and I'd certainly like to give tribute and credit along the way where it is deserved. But the point is that you don't see Visna on this document created by Dr. Gallo. At the same time that he created this chart, he was preparing his paper as to the homologous relationship between HIV and Visna. Yet, instead of putting Visna, if we can move up to the top, instead of putting Visna on this chart, because he knew people would say, how can you have an Icelandic sheep disease and a simian disease coming out of Africa when Icelandic sheep don't go to Africa? Well, so instead of putting Visna on his chart, he put ancestral origin question mark. But his paper proves that ancestral origin is the Visna virus created by the Germans and sent to Iceland in 1930. This research paper here, created earlier this year, conclusively proves that man gave monkeys an immune suppression. This is a paper by the Japanese researchers coming out of the Institute for Virus Research of Kyoto, Japan. And they conclude definitively that it is a recent transfer of simian immunodeficiency virus to simians, let alone that transfer back to man. So this is a Japanese paper. It stands on its own, and it has stood all year. It provides evidence for cross-species transmission between humans and chimpanzees rather recently. This is the conclusion as it stands this evening, October 29, 1999. I bring this article in, coming out just this past July, 1999. And there's just a couple more, and we'll wrap this up. But interestingly enough, this piece here is the death knell for the United States. And let me tell you why. What they say is that when Dr. Gallo in 1984 said, aha, we know what the mystery illness is, it is then they say that they undertook to find out how to make the recipes to create cancer. Well, we have the special virus progress reports, and our records and evidence shows that this is a bogus document from the United States government in the sense that the special virus program is nothing but recipes of cancer research. It is false for anyone to believe, and for our government to put out a document to this effect, that they've only been working at this for the last 15 years, as they purport to here. They are absolutely false. So there's some explaining to do. And there's just a couple more, and these go in. Someone said, well, do you have the complaint that was filed in the federal court? And in fact, we do. This is cover page, and it shows that we're here in the federal court before Judge Wells against Secretary Cohen as it relates to AIDS and some other federal defendants. And if you can move down the page as we go down just a little bit further, and we say, number one, in the federal lawsuit, on or about July 1, 1969, defendant, U.S. Pentagon did conspire with the United States Congress for the purposes of creating a synthetic biological agent. And I think that that's what we're all about, and that's what we're doing. And these are just some more of the statements of the listing of what's in the lawsuit. And it's pretty much a recapitulation of what we've gone over this evening. And there's going on to the next page of that. We have the jurisdictional statement as to who we are, why we're in the federal court. And basically, we cite all the jurisdictional parameters. And we're saying that with respect to HIV and AIDS, that jurisdiction is founded under the Geneva Protocol. the Nuremberg Code of Justice, and the Biological Weapons Convention Treaty of 1972. And if we have our last slide here, and one that I will end with, if you didn't know it, you know it now. This is genocide. And this is eventually going to be a whole lot worse than what happened with Hitler in the middle half of this century. But this is genocide of the worst order. And millions of people have died. Millions more are going to die. I would like to end on this point that we believe that in the flowchart, and you can leave this one up there for the people. We believe that in the flowchart that there is an area called immunological control, that it appears to us that the cure for AIDS, the cure for chronic fatigue syndrome, the cure for Gulf War syndrome sits on the shelves of the laboratories of the United States government. We're asking that immediate congressional review of the extensive scientific information and evidence of the laboratory origin of AIDS get underway. We appreciate you all taking your time to come out this evening to view the information as we attempt to further educate ourselves and the public on the true origin of AIDS and the impact that it's having on mankind. We thank you very much for your attention and your time this evening. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.